Earlier today, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo spoke to the global coalition about America's future efforts in the war against ISIS.
That's why President Trump's announcement that U.S. troops will be withdrawing from Syria is not the end of America's fight. The fight is one that we will continue to wage alongside of you. The drawdown of troops is essentially a tactical change. It is not a change in the mission. It does not change the structure, design, or authorities on which the campaign has been based. It simply represents a new stage in an old fight.
CBS News State Department reporter Christina Ruffini joins me now. Christina, we've heard the president repeatedly say ISIS has been defeated. I want to play for you what the top U.S. intelligence leaders had to say just this past week about this topic.
ISIS will continue to be a threat to the United States.
They're still dangerous, which is your point, and they're the largest Sunni terrorist group, and they still command thousands of fighters in Iraq and Syria.
Does Secretary Pompeo agree with the president that ISIS has been defeated?
So the secretary didn't address that directly. Again, last night, even the State of the Union, we heard the president say that ISIS is all but done. There's only remnants of it left, and those remnants will be taken care of by our allies. Well, more than 70 of our allies have come here today to the State Department to figure out how exactly they're going to do that. As you heard Secretary Pompeo say, the U.S. is alleging that by withdrawing our troops, it's a tactical shift, right? We're saying we're still in the fight, we're still with you, and we want to see this to the end. But they're not saying how exactly they're going to do that, especially without forces on the ground. And what U.S. allies here today are listening for are specifics on how the U.S. plans to stay in a fight while it's also withdrawing some of its forces. They want to make sure the U.S. is not going to abandon them at the last mile of this marathon, and Secretary Pompeo is seeking to convince them that we're going to be there with them through the end.
We know the Pentagon says 6 to 12 months ISIS could regain some of that territory at this point. Did Pompeo express any concerns about what the Pentagon is saying about a resurgence of ISIS?
Not directly, and there's this really interesting phrase we've been hearing from the secretary and officials in the last week, and that's when they refer to the defeat of ISIS, they're quantifying it and saying the defeat of the physical caliphate, and that's kind of a way to acknowledge that there are still thousands of fighters left. ISIS still exists, the ideology is still strong and still has strongholds, but that, yes, the U.S. and its allies have taken back most of the territory that ISIS still holds, and that's because they have to walk this fine line, right, between not wanting to contradict the president, who keeps saying over and over again ISIS is defeated, but also coming to summits like this with our allies and being realistic and saying we still need things from you. Why would we still need things if ISIS was fully defeated? Well, the physical caliphate is defeated, but we still have other issues to work out, like foreign fighters, like the ideology, and the fact that, as you mentioned, our own intelligence officials say that without constant pressure, the organization could resurge in as little as 6 months.
What do you think we'll hear from the president later today on this?
I don't think we're going to hear him contradict himself and suddenly say he doesn't think ISIS is defeated. I expect to hear things along the same lines that we heard last night, extolling the U.S. victory with our allies, talking about, what a great job everybody did in defeating ISIS. But there's a couple things I think we should listen for. First of all, timelines. If the president offers any more specific details about when exactly U.S. forces will be pulling out and how that's going to happen. The other thing to listen for is conditions. If you remember, in January, when John Bolton went overseas, he said that U.S. forces would stay in Syria until ISIS was completely defeated, Iran was out, and we had maintained protections for the Kurdish forces who fought with U.S. militias to defeat ISIS. Now, those comments angered the Turks to the point where they canceled a meeting with him when he was in Ankara. So that's been a big sticking point. And Turkey, which has the second largest standing army in NATO, is the heir apparent to take over this fight from the U.S. So we also need to listen if the president mentions any progress with those negotiations with the Turks to see if those details have been worked out, if they've maintained protections from the Kurds while being able to negotiate a way that Turkey can take over this fight on the ground. The other thing to listen for is any major announcements. You would have thought we would have heard it last night, but we weren't expecting that tweet in December that pulled U.S. forces out of Syria, so you never know. Stay tuned, and we'll have to hear what he has to say this afternoon.
All right, Christina Ruffini, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you so much.